Welcome friends. We can now discuss the novel Pride and Prejudice as a plot and as a novel of concerns. Now first the plot. The plot is suggested by the term the novel of manners, where problems will be raised and finally they will be resolved. So far as this novel is concerned, you have a large number of characters in it, because after all it's a novel of manners, and the more characters, the more variety of, the better variety of, greater variety of the manners can be presented. So it has a family that is at the center of the novel. The family is the Bennet family, and it's a family of 7 parents, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, and they have only daughters. How many daughters? 5. And the eldest is Jane, second is Elizabeth, third is Mary, fourth is Kitty, and the last one is Lydia. Lydia is 16 years, adolescent. Kitty would be around the same age. Mary might be 19. Elizabeth might be 20. Jane might be 21. I'm just telling you the age that is associated with these characters. And the first sentence of the novel actually starts making us smile, and after that it goes on quite well. What is the first sentence? The first sentence is, it's a truth universally accepted, universally acknowledged, that a man with good fortune would always be in need of a wife. How is it a truth? How is it universally accepted or acknowledged? Now this makes us smile. That perhaps the author is cracking a joke, and the author is doing it and the author is not doing it, because the author is assuming a particular kind of a tone. The tone is comic. She is in a way as if she is sitting in front of an audience and she is assuming some tone, and in that tone she says, anybody who can marry will marry. Anybody who has the means to marry can run a family. He has enough money, he has a good house, then the next natural thing for him would be to marry. Why does the author say so? Why does the narrator say so? And in the context of the Bennet family, now the question is quite clear, that the Bennet family is full of daughters, and their only job is to arrange the marriage of the daughters. Now it's as simple as that. But is it simple? Because when you marry, then you require grooms who would suit your daughters. Who in this case, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet would have to convince themselves that they think of the marriage of one or the other daughter, keeping in mind the qualities, the behavior of the prospective groom. And that's the first thing. But there are more things involved here, because and this I say with the awareness that at the time when the novel is written, women are very precariously positioned in society. Their life is insecure. They have no protection, monetary protection at all. Now imagine this family. Mr. and Mrs. Bennet would be at least in their 40s and early 50s maybe, and the average age, the life, the length of life in those days would be around 60. So they have just another 15, 16 years of life to live, and in this life they have to arrange the marriage of the 5 daughters. If they don't arrange, if they fail to arrange, where will the daughters go after they die? Well, you can say that the women may not marry, and that they can survive on the resources of the father. They can occupy the same house and live there. You can say that today, and laws permit us to say this, because women will inherit the property of their parents. But was that the case in England at the time the novel was written? Were women legally capable, allowed to inherit the property of their father? The answer is no. So they have to. A family must have a son who will inherit the property of the father. If there are daughters, they will be shunted out by somebody. Now who will inherit the property of a person? Think about this in the 19th century, and the author tells very clearly that the property will be inherited by the next close male relative. And there is a person known to this family who is a close relative, but they have never met this person, because they never thought that they will ever be in touch with this person. He lives elsewhere in another place, and but he knows, and they also know, that he is close, and if Mr. Bennet dies, then the property will go not to the daughters but to this male relative. So it is compulsory for this family to marry them off, so that they go to another home and there they survive. If they are not able to marry, and if the father dies, what happens? They starve. So the only faithfulness regarding these characters would be that of starving if the marriage doesn't happen. So this is one problem, and this is the most important problem for them. This is life and death kind of a situation in which these girls live, and the sooner they married, the better it would be. What about Jane, first daughter, who is the eldest? Well, everybody is certain that she will get married. Why? Because she has good looks. She's very coy. She's very shy. She has good manners. She's very submissive, and all those things that are associated with a charming young woman. So Jane would definitely attract the attention in a big crowd of some male or the other. So they are not worried about that. Elizabeth is of course good looking, but not as good looking, not stunning as Jane is. But her strong point is that she is not shy and coy. She's quite bright, and she can argue, and she can discuss, and she can disagree. And for a woman to disagree would be taken as an affront. But then she also is very lively. So a lively person with a good mind and who can take part in discussions intelligently, that might attract the attention of certain males. So she also will marry. Mary, the third one, is very simple, bland, not good looks, nor a good mind either. Kitty, the same thing. And Lydia, she is ebullient. She is full of energy and very beautiful, but then she has no mind at all. In fact, some women would not have at the age of adolescence, at an age of 16, that kind of maturity which will get them to an appropriate husband. She'll attract anybody's attention, but perhaps she also may not be able to marry as easily. So you have a novel in which only two girls have some chances of getting married, and the other three, one doesn't know where they will go after Mr. Bennet dies. What do you say about the situation? Well, this is how the plot unfolds itself. So these girls will be going to parties, and there they will attract the attention of young men. They will enter into a discussion. They will dance together, and if they dance twice, thrice in that village, then maybe somebody proposes to one of the other daughters, and they will marry. And that happens in the case of Jane, that there is a person who has visited this village and he has bought a house here, initially rented, and he might stay on here, and he is unmarried, so he might marry Jane. I mean, there are prospects there, and both meet at a party and they like each other. Elizabeth, she is a woman of the future. She is a woman who thinks, and she will attract attention, but most males will keep off her. They can't face her mind. They can't actually enter into a discussion with her because she is very witty. She can play with words, and she can enchant you by her linguistic skills. So only a person who is mentally developed enough, who has read well, who is educated, only that person will attract the attention. And there might be some in the crowd of dancers in the party who might be attracted towards her. And then the actual story, Elizabeth meets a person who is Jane's who is the friend of the person who likes Jane, and this person is a aristocrat, and he is handsome, and he has read a lot, and he talks well. But in the party in which Elizabeth and Jane, this person Darcy, that's his name, Fitzwilliam Darcy, that's his name, when they meet, then Elizabeth first overhears Darcy talking to his friend Bingley, saying that, well, in this particular crowd, he says, he doesn't mean to be heard. He whispers into the into the ears of his friend that in this crowd only one girl is worth dancing with, and that is Jane. And then he says others are just normal, and he doesn't find them attractive enough. And Elizabeth overhears it. what kind of impression she will form of the man. You can say that the novel is going to be actually an account of the tussle between Elizabeth and Darcy. Why? Because Darcy said something not meant to be heard by Elizabeth, but he said something about Elizabeth indirectly. That Jane is the only one who will take his attention, but other girls are not up to the mark. It's a male gaze also, so you can straight away say that a woman writer writing about this is pointing out to the people that men judge a woman by her looks, and straight away they form an opinion, which is a kind of haughtiness, a kind of hauteur, a kind of pride. And Elizabeth is very angry when she thinks of or she meets a person who is proud like Darcy appears to be. So there is going to be a tussle between Darcy and Elizabeth for this reason, that Elizabeth has already formed her opinion about him, hearing him talk slightingly about her indirectly. So Elizabeth will be prejudiced against him. He has shown pride, there is no doubt about that. He doesn't mix up well, and Elizabeth also doesn't mix up, but she can mix up well because she is a lively person. But in this case, there is a kind of a twist right in the beginning, and that is what makes us also interested in the novel. Whether Elizabeth and Darcy will keep on fighting and will reject each other, that's the question that is raised, and this will be followed by other things. Before we go further in this plot, let me tell you that Mr. Collins, who is also the same age as these people and who is the legal heir to the property of Mr. Bennet, he decides to come to this village in search of a bride, in search of a woman whom he would marry. And he knows that he has to inherit the property of the Bennet family. So and the Bennet family has many daughters, so he might pick up one of the daughters and marry her, and at least give some kind of protection to this family by being its son-in-law. So he descends one day on the family and he starts talking very clearly. He's a comic character. He starts talking in very clear terms, that he came with a purpose to marry, and straight away Mrs. Bennet gets interested in him also. Okay, yes, you are most welcome here, and we have so many daughters, and Mr. Collins says, I came to know in the party that Jane already had been attracted towards Mr. Bingley. So initially I thought that I would be interested in her, but I can take Elizabeth equally well. She is also good enough. And Elizabeth hears it because he says it openly. And after that he makes a proposal to her, that he'll marry her. And this is a very hilarious scene. Why should he marry Elizabeth is the question. And Jane, this writer, is very amused by his ideas. He says, I'll marry because I'll do a good to the family. That's hardly a kind of explanation for a future son-in-law, to be accepted by the family. But then he says it very openly, very clearly. He is built around on the model of a fool in the earlier literature in English, and he is actually wearing his heart on his sleeve. Whatever is there is in mind, he always makes it clear. He talks directly. So he takes permission, for instance, from Mrs. Bennet, whether he can talk to, and he wants to talk to Elizabeth in private, so that he can propose to her. And Mrs. Bennet says, yes, go ahead. I'm so happy that you are such a bright young man. She says, neither is she bright herself, nor is the young man she's talking about is bright. But then that's how the novel proceeds. So this hilarious scene occurs between Collins and Elizabeth. So Collins gives a long lecture on how it occurred to him that he should marry one of the family here, and he gives a long lecture, and that completely puts off Elizabeth. She thinks that this man doesn't talk sense at all. She wants to say something negative to him, but he doesn't allow. And when she says that she doesn't want to get married to him, and then she says, oh, all women initially say this, but finally they marry because they want to marry a man of the kind that Collins is. And this joke continues, and finally this joke becomes heavy, and Elizabeth makes it clear that she doesn't want to marry him at all. Okay, then whom would she marry? Darcy, she doesn't like Darcy. Darcy is getting attracted in the later parties, but Elizabeth is giving him a cold shoulder. She doesn't want to think of marriage at all with him. I will not discuss in this novel Mary, Kitty, because they will not be able to marry, and she may die unmarried, like the author herself. And I'll discuss the case of Lydia a bit, and then I'll just talk about the points. Mr. Collins is rejected by Elizabeth. I've said this to you, but then he also doesn't like it being rejected, so he stays for the evening, for the night there, and then he moves around in the village. And there is another girl called Charlotte Lucas. He meets her and he finds her all right, so he proposes to her then, and Charlotte Lucas agrees to marry him. Why does Charlotte Lucas agree to marry him? Such a fool? Well, she is desperate. She is beyond the marriageable age. She must be 26 or 27, and she faces the same challenge that all women in the middle class women in the 19th century will be facing, that the property will go to somebody else and that they would starve. So they have to marry. So Charlotte Lucas says, any man will do, so because he will give me protection, so let me marry. Okay, now the plot is this, and this is a simple plot. But then one thing has happened, that Elizabeth has become prejudiced against Darcy, and this will continue. I will cut the story short because it's in one lecture. It's very difficult to go into all these ideas. But let me tell you that after a few twists and turns in the novel, Elizabeth will get into problems at the level of her own family, and Darcy at that point of time might help her because he's a rich man and he also likes her. So for her sake, he can do some favor to the family. Now this is the situation. What should Elizabeth do? She wants somebody to help. Darcy can help. She doesn't ask him, but he behind the scenes can help him. And this is what is happening. But why? What is the problem with the Bennet family? The problem is this: that Lydia also is going to the parties, and she is very reckless in the parties. She wants to enjoy. She wants to have fun in life. And there is one person called Wickham, who first is attracted towards Elizabeth because he is very polished. He is an army officer, and he goes around with very impressive manners. So Elizabeth and this person is critical of Darcy. Elizabeth is also critical of Darcy. So Elizabeth in fact starts getting attracted towards him, and this person also is attracted towards Elizabeth. But why should he marry Elizabeth? She's a person from a poor family, so he can have good fun with her, but he can't marry her. So he's not showing any interest. But then Elizabeth and that person Wickham, they become friends, and Wickham is actually the sworn enemy of Darcy. So Elizabeth also likes that she is now meeting an enemy of Darcy, and she can do something in terms of anger with Darcy. So she also likes him. But in the meantime, Wickham has lost patience, and one day he runs away with Lydia. Where they have gone, nobody knows. Can Lydia be retrieved? Will she be retrieved from the clutches of Wickham? That's the question. And then Darcy comes to know that Wickham has done this, and Darcy knew Mr. Wickham quite well. In fact, they were enemies, and they were part of the same family. And Darcy was helping him, but then he would take the help and still ask for more. And finally, Wickham was having an eye on Darcy's sister. If he married, then he'll have a lot of property share in Darcy's big property. So it was that kind of a twist that has occurred, and Darcy, for his own interest and for the interest of the family, because of Elizabeth, he bails out Elizabeth. He gets back Wickham from London, and he gets back Lydia. He compels them to marry, and that's how Elizabeth, because he has now done help to the family, she now understands that Darcy is a good person. Now the novel ends, in the acceptance of Elizabeth, acceptance by Elizabeth of Darcy. Why? Because one day she goes to his place, and then she sees his property. She sees his estate. She just climbs up the second story or the third story, whatever, and she has a long view of the land that he owns, and she tells herself that if she had agreed to marry, and she once was proposed, Darcy proposed to her and she said no, but she said that perhaps if she had agreed, then all this property would be hers, and because now they are friends, so finally she agrees to marry him, and she becomes then the wife of Mr. Darcy. That's how the comic resolution has occurred. This is the ending of the novel, which means that Elizabeth, who was not interested in marrying a person because she didn't like him, finally gets interested because of his money and the help that he gave her. What does it mean? And in fact, this is a serious question that the writer is raising, and this is a question that affects the lives of all young women at that time, young women belonging to the middle class, where they have nowhere to go. So what actually affects, influences the judgments of women at that time, as intelligent and bright young women as Elizabeth, is the question. What do you think? That a woman doesn't want to marry a person, but then she is bound by the necessity, and she has to marry, and that she marries the same person whom she didn't like earlier because he helped her and because he was rich. If somebody helps, then the woman agrees, and if he didn't help, then the woman doesn't agree. What kind of consideration is this in the context of the novel of manners, where marriage will occur only when both the people like each other? So that is the ideal situation that is not there. So it's a different thing that she starts loving him and he also loves her, and the marriage is successful finally, and it has also solved the problems of the family. But then one knows that Elizabeth would not have married if this problem had not occurred at her own family level. So what do we call it? I think there is a kind of irony built in the plot of the novel, that for the wrong reasons the good person, the intelligent person, the person with mind, the person with a grown-up sensibility, that person also can be arm twisted by the power of money, by the power of privilege, and by the power of favor that can come from somebody. So this is a serious novel. It has fools in it. It has a large number of people who gossip. They disagree and they are funny, and it has some petty people also, particularly Bingley, who will marry Jane, their daughter, sisters, and all. All that is going to be very interesting to talk about. But then the main plot that is at the center is of Elizabeth Darcy clash, and Elizabeth meets the right person, marries the right person for the wrong reason. Not that she loved him initially. In fact, she was almost like an enemy, behaving like an enemy with him. But finally she is brought round. Why? Because of the power of money. So imagine that even though resolution is comic, revolution is that they marry and they also like each other. But the reason behind that is something different. So the writer is saying yes, no. The writer is saying it might be possible in the case of these two individuals, but generally there is no chance that a person with sensibility, a person with some kind of a grown-up character would ever be satisfied in the contemporary circumstance. Then I've already discussed these characters. This William Darcy, Wickham, I consider he is a kind of a villain. Mr. Collins, who is already married. Lady Catherine de Bourgh. This character is a very wooden character. She's an aristocrat. She owns a large tract of land. She is also Darcy's relative, and she thinks that she can get her own daughter married to Darcy, and she throws her weight around. And she is very oppressive in nature. So the writer is showing this class, the presence of this class in the English society at that time. But then nobody in the novel, nobody would appreciate that kind of hauteur that she also has, the kind of heavy and intolerable habits that she has. So and the last point also discussed, at center the novel has a profound sense of irony. So I'll finish this discussion with the comment. I would say that first impressions, which was the novel, the first impressions, illusions and subjective opinion or prejudices give way to detachment, balance, reasonableness, and more painfully to humiliating reassessment. This is the problem with the novel, that you change your opinions, your prejudices are replaced by detachment, not by direct confrontation with the prejudices, but that you become detached. You start overlooking them. You want to attain balance in life. How can balance be attained in life when the whole economic social structure is topsy-turvy? And reasonableness is your answer. The answer is not change. The answer is not reassessment. The answer is actually accepting whatever is possible. So this novel that way becomes a supporter of the traditional wisdom from the point of view of the plot. But as I told you, the value of the novel lies in the fact that it entertains you, and at the same time he points at a more tragic possibility in life that cannot be completely overlooked. So I call it one of the best novels that is there in English literature, where the answers that are given are actually questioned by the author herself, not directly but through the ironical representation of them. I hope you have enjoyed the lecture, and I've raised certain questions. Go over them, make your own judgment, but keep in mind the fact that all these issues will emerge, and you will have to work out in your own way the answers, if there are answers, in the context of this novel. Thank you.